Welcome everyone to our final Science Friday of 2024. A lot of you are joining us virtually, and we do have some in-house here today at Oldham Creek. So thank you for everyone who's attending. As people are coming in, Javon is going to keep admitting the online people. There's a chat feature, so if you have any questions, put them in the chat. And we will do questions at the end of Haley's presentation. If you are lucky enough to be here at Oldham Creek, thank you to the friends of Oldham Creek who help sponsor this program and provide us with refreshments, sweet treats, cookies, and beverages. They will continue to sponsor us next year. Our first Science Friday of next year will be April 4th, and we will be talking about what helps water quality and our Oldham Creek watershed report cards. In collaboration with water quality, today we're going to be talking about marine debris, specifically in the Great Lakes. I think a lot of people think about our ocean coastlines when we're talking about marine debris, but NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, has a very strong contingent in the Great Lakes, several offices, and Haley is the Great Lakes Regional Coordinator for this program. So Haley, I'm gonna let you give any other facts about yourself that you would like, and then we will get started. All right.
Yes, thank you so much for the introduction. I am based in Ann Arbor, Michigan, so that's part of why I'm not in the room with some of you today. But thank you all for joining at Oldham Creek. Thank you for joining online. I'm really excited to dive into some of the marine debris myths and actions that are taking place in the region. And as Jennifer said, my name's Haley Dalian, and I'm the Great Lakes Regional Coordinator for the NOAA Marine Debris Program. So let's dive right in. I want to make sure we're starting with a common definition of what marine debris is. So this is simply any solid human-made material that's either accidentally or intentionally disposed of in the marine environment or the Great Lakes. Most commonly in the Great Lakes, plastic is the main type of debris that we find, which I will talk a lot more about shortly. There are a number of places that marine debris can originate from, including littering, illegal dumping, poor waste management, stormwater discharge, and from the impacts of natural disasters like hurricanes. These are all of the land-based sources that we typically see. But there are also on-water-based sources of marine debris. And this includes commercial and recreational fishing, cargo ships, recreational vessels, and more. Marine debris takes a lot of different shapes and forms. On the larger side, we're talking about abandoned and derelict vessels, which we often call ADVs for short, derelict fishing gear of all types, and other large forms of debris that cannot be removed by hand, such as barges, pier pilings, and bridges. On the smaller side, many of you are probably quite familiar with plastic pollution as a very prevalent form of marine debris in the environment. This is a non-biodegradable mixture of many different polymers. They come in different colors, sizes, and chemical makeups. Think about all the different consumer products you use every day that are made of plastic, for example. This diversity of materials is also what we end up finding in the environment. So those consumer products all the way down to tiny microfibers. Overall, we're talking about an estimated 22 million pounds of plastic debris that is entering the Great Lakes every single year. And that number needs to be microplastics, which are pieces smaller than 5 millimeters in diameter. These can be small enough to fit on the tip of your fingertip, and sometimes they're often so small they cannot be seen by the human eye. We refer to microplastics under two different classifications of either primary or secondary. Primary microplastics are those that are intentionally made to be very small for a specific reason. One example of this is microbeads that are found in personal care products like toothpaste or an exfoliating face wash. Another example are pre-production pellets. Sometimes these are called nurdles informally, and they're manufactured to be small so they can be melted down and molded into those everyday plastic products that we're buying. In terms of secondary microplastics, these, on the other hand, break off from larger plastic objects. This can be due to activity from sun, wave, and wind exposure that makes plastic really brittle. And so then the microplastics break up from those larger objects and persist in the environment. Another common form of secondary microplastics are microfibers and also tire wear particles. These both result from everyday use, so they can be released due to friction or mechanical release when we're going about our everyday activities, which is why these two types are really prolific in the environment. Microfibers are often made of synthetic materials like polyester, and they shed from our clothing, furniture, fishing nets, you name it. But even natural fibers that aren't made of plastics, such as cotton, can still be problematic if they're chemically treated or dyed. So that's important to keep in mind as well. Tire wear particles, we think of these as microplastics because they contain plasticizers and many different chemicals. They, of course, result from road abrasion when we're driving, which is why we see them a lot in the environment as well. And they also don't degrade over time. Continuing on, this is a more detailed list of where we see microfibers originating and how they can easily be released into the environment. To date, textiles like the clothing that we wear is what has been most studied in terms of microfiber shedding. But as I mentioned, there are a lot of other sources of microfibers in the environment. These can be cigarette butt filters down to cleaning wipes even. So many of you may be sitting here or listening online and already drawing some of the conclusions as to why marine debris, from the big stuff all the way down to the small stuff, is such a huge problem. Animals can often mistake plastics for food, which can fill their stomachs, leading to a false sense of fullness and ultimately starvation. Wildlife often become entangled in plastic bags or ghost fishing gear that's been lost in the water and continues to fish or catch these animals over time. Floating or even sunken debris can be a major hazard to safe navigation, and it can obstruct ports as well. Debris impacts fisheries, recreation, tourism, and all of that adds up to a big economic loss no matter where you are. Debris can also serve as a transport mechanism for non-native species into new habitats, and it can transport harmful chemical pollutants like heavy metals, PFAS, etc. And this is because those microplastics are very absorptive, the surface of them, to carry these other pollutants. So this is a laundry list of some of the reasons why we should care about and talk more about marine debris. Now, with some of the facts in mind and the context I've discussed, I want to go through some common myths about marine debris that you may have heard and try to talk through them so you have more common working knowledge when you encounter these in conversation at the dinner table or anywhere else. So the first myth we're going to discuss is that garbage patches are solid islands of plastic in the ocean that are visible from space. So it is true that there are large areas in the ocean that accumulate marine debris, like litter, fishing gear, microplastics, and other types of debris. They are formed by rotating ocean currents called gyres. However, these are not solid islands of plastic trash, which is often how this topic is depicted in articles or on social media. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Instead of the debris, or excuse me, instead of being solid, the debris is actually spread across the surface of the ocean and also distributed throughout the water column from the surface all the way down to the ocean floor. So for this reason, we like to think of the garbage patches as more like a soup with pepper flakes mixed in and swirling around. Because of this distribution, it makes it very hard to actually visualize the different patches. And so that's why we can't actually see them from space. Space satellite and drone imagery just can't capture this highly mobile and dispersed patch. There are some research groups that are trying to identify plastics and microplastics from space using remote sensing technology. But it's really important to know when we think about cleanup efforts or talking about these that they're not just these intact islands that can easily be tackled. All right, moving on to our second myth is that bioplastics are the answer to the plastic pollution problem. So bioplastic is an umbrella term that encompasses several categories of plastics that differ in how they're made, how much of their content comes from renewable sources, and importantly, how we dispose of them at the end of their life. So this term can refer to the feedstock material or what's actually making the object, or it can refer to how it's disposed of at the end of its life, which can get tricky. So all that to say, not all bioplastics are even biodegradable or compostable. And some of these objects take really specific conditions to even be able to break down properly. Often these are conditions like really high temperatures or microbes to dissolve them that don't occur in the natural environment. So bioplastics are much more complex than we might think of as just one broad category. As I mentioned, in order to be compostable, a lot of these products have to be sent to an industrial or a commercial composting facility because they have higher temperatures, higher oxygen levels, and they have microorganisms that are designed to break them down. These are all very different conditions than we find in the natural environment or that we would find in our home composting bin, for example. Unfortunately, industrial composting facilities don't exist in every community. Even recycling infrastructure doesn't exist in every community. So if compostable plastics are they're not making their way to these facilities, that means they're not just breaking down in backyards or on the side of a highway, in a landfill, etc. So that's why I have 3 really important takeaways on the slide here. One is that biodegradable or compostable plastics can contaminate the recycling stream. So if they're accidentally put into a recycling bin when they're not designed for that, then it's contamination and it messes with the process. Second is that traditional plastics, if people think that they are biodegradable, they can also contaminate the industrial composting system. And the common denominator we have here is that labeling of products is extremely important. So that way we can educate people on how to properly dispose of the materials so we can reduce contamination at end of life. And let's see, this brings me to our final myth that we're going to discuss today, which is that most plastic waste is recycled. Recycling is one of the solutions, many solutions to the plastic pollution problem. However, only a small percentage of plastic waste is recycled, unfortunately. From the most recent Environmental Protection Agency recycling report, it found that the US produced 292.4 million tons of municipal solid waste, and about 24% of that waste was recycled. Overall, this amounts to about only 8.7% of the plastic waste that's received out of total waste being recycled. And that, of course, can vary by municipality or community, but that's kind of the broad average. It is important to note that materials like cardboard, paper, glass, and metal do have higher recycling rates, which is good, but we, of course, use an abundance of single-use plastics every day. And so that small recycling percentage is a part of the problem. The best solution to plastic pollution is reducing, refusing, and reusing. Recycling is a part of this, but we like to encourage people to think about the other R's, or other ways that you can make everyday decisions. This starts by being a smart and selective consumer. So when I'm shopping, I like to think about the following things. First is how you can be conscientious of the packaging choices in your local store. Could you purchase the same goods in bulk, or could you try to avoid plastic packaging? In general, it can be helpful to ask yourself if you need something before you buy it, or to think about the quality and longevity of the gifts and products you buy, so that way they're meant to last a long time. You may have also heard the saying that we don't need everybody doing zero waste perfectly, but we do need everybody trying it and doing it imperfectly. So this can start with simply keeping a reusable grocery bag in your car so you don't have to use single-use plastic bags, and replacing single-use water bottles with one awesome reusable water bottle. These are all really simple entry points into getting into a zero waste mindset. But of course, there's many other ways to scale up from there. All right, now we're going to shift a bit and cover a few positive marine debris stories, specifically taking place in the Great Lakes and beyond, but trying to give you some local examples too. I first want to take a quick step back and introduce you to some of the people that are working on this issue, including the Marine Debris Program that I support. So the NOAA Marine Debris Program is the federal lead for addressing marine debris. We are a small but mighty team that you see pictured here, and our mission and vision is to see the global ocean and the Great Lakes free from the impacts of marine debris. Our program is also a non-regulatory agency, non-regulatory within NOAA, which means, for example, that we don't have the authority to mandate changes in behavior or to create restrictions on the use of certain products. But what we do is focus on these 6 strategic pillars, including prevention, removal, research, monitoring and detection, emergency response, and coordination. I also want to emphasize that although we are the US government lead for addressing marine debris, our program is by far not the only entity tackling marine debris. We rely on many different partners who are on the ground in local communities moving the needle on this issue, such as Old Woman Creek. And there are also so many researchers in essentially every discipline and field that are interested in marine debris, from toxicologists, engineers, ecologists, urban planners that are all really interested in marine debris. And we like to emphasize that because it is a holistic issue that requires all different folks to come to the table and work on it. So you can see a snapshot of that here. All right, so the first positive example I'll share on marine debris action is this joint microfiber pollution report that our program co-developed alongside the Environmental Protection Agency's Trash Free Waters program. So this was a report that was mandated by Congress as part of the Save Our Seas 2.0 Act. So we were tasked with providing Congress an overview of the microfiber pollution issue, defining microfiber, and outlining a plan for how federal agencies and other stakeholders can begin to address this problem. So I have a QR code here, but you can also find it hopefully pretty easily online. And this was released earlier this year. Zooming in on another example in the Great Lakes, we have the Great Lakes Marine Debris Action Plan. So across our program, we have 11 different regions. Mine is the only freshwater one, covering all 8 Great Lakes states and work with Canadian stakeholders. So this action plan is a framework to try to organize all of those different partners and actions. So it includes 39 partners with 47 actions. And as I mentioned, there are folks from all of the Great Lakes states and also Ontario that are working on this issue. The action plan is divided into similar pillars to our program, which is research and monitoring, policy and management, prevention, and removal. And it's worth noting that every region, while marine debris is an issue there, has unique challenges. We don't, for example, experience many hurricanes or storms, which can be more prevalent marine debris issues for some of the coasts. So because dominant debris types and challenges differ by region, that's why we have these unique action plans that are tailored to the geography that we're talking about and incorporate regional expertise. The third example I wanted to point out is the NOAA Marine Debris Monitoring and Assessment Project, or MDMAP. And this is where partners and citizen science volunteers from all around the world are surveying and recording the amount and types of marine debris that they're finding on shorelines using our standardized protocol and survey. So this may sound familiar to some of the listeners or folks in the room. Old Woman Creek is an extremely active training partner and operator of some of these sites and volunteer coordinator. And you guys should all be very proud if you are involved, because the Lake Erie shoreline is one of the most active hubs for new MDMAP sites that our program has seen in the last year. So that is thanks to a lot of the education and outreach efforts that Old Woman Creek has coordinated. I know there's also a volunteer celebration and training event next Thursday, which is awesome. I want to point out too that we have a new resource, which is the MDMAP Guide for Educators. We've found that MDMAP is a really great tool for educators to use with school-age children, for field trips and ongoing youth programming. So we created this guide to be even specific for them and to have more people get involved in this effort. All right, the fourth and final example I have is actually many different examples of more excellent marine debris work that's taking place in Ohio. The first one here is the Ohio Clean Marinas Program, which has an 18-year track record of successfully recycling boat shrink wrap, as you can see from this headline from this summer. The marine debris display that you can see on the right here is from Perry's Victory Memorial. We funded the creation of this mobile display through a partnership with the National Park Service. So we have different art and educational displays at multiple national parks, and this was one that was funded a few years ago. You can see a snapshot in the lower left here of partners at Cuyahoga County that launched a Bring Your Own Bag campaign with the community and with local retailers. So highly encourage you to look into that if you're interested. They have awesome incentive programs with the retailers and the community, and they make really great videos too to promote this, and I also enjoy their logo. The last example you can see here is Skip the Straw, which was a restaurant-driven prevention program that our project funded a few years ago to encourage South Bass Island visitors to refuse drinking straws at all of the different restaurants and bars when they're visiting the island. And that saw a lot of great success from that program. Okay, that was a lot of talking from me. I feel like I maybe went a little fast, but that leaves a ton of different time for questions. So I want to emphasize before we get to questions that if you are tuning in and you ever have any marine debris questions, leads that you found, or curiosities, please feel free to consider me your point of contact and to save my contact information. I also have a quarterly newsletter to try to organize and share all of the wonderful work that's going on in the Great Lakes. Our website, marinedebris.noaa.gov, has a ton of different resources for everyone, and a lot of different education resources too. So encourage you to visit that. And I really want to thank you all for tuning in, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Haley. That was really interesting. Any questions in the room?
The difference between electric vehicles and gas-powered vehicles, tires, wasn't clear to me. Which is worse?
Yes, let me go back to that slide. So this, might be an optical illusion or maybe a little bit of a tricky graphic, but this is from the Tire Collective. So they are a lead researcher, an educator of the issue with tire wear particles. And this graphic from their website is simply pointing out that whether it's an electric vehicle or a gas-powered vehicle, the tire wear particles from them are the same. So you can see in these two boxes, the tire wear particles collected from driving in one day from both an electric vehicle and a regular vehicle. So that, certainly complicates the issue, thinking about reducing carbon emissions and the benefits of renewable energy. But at the same time, you can see whether it's a renewable powered vehicle or not, we still have this microplastic tire wear particle issue. So I know there's some research from this collective and certainly others that are trying to think of, I think it's either aftermarket or kind of in the manufacturing process, a way to capture the tire wear particles from the tire, some kind of like retrofitted device that can fit on the tire wheel itself. But I'm really glad you brought up that question and pointed it out. It's interesting and maybe difficult to wrap your mind around too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Well, Haley, maybe you answered all the questions about marine debris.
I hope not. Maybe.
No, but so Haley's contact information is there. And you can go onto the website. We do have that marine debris monitoring program training next Thursday night. We are at capacity, but we do have a flow over date. So anyone can also contact me if they want more information about that. This presentation will go up on our YouTube playlist on DNR's YouTube channel. So if anyone wants to rewatch it or send it out, give us a week or two to get it up, and it'll be there. All right, if there are no further questions, we'll release everyone back to their Friday.
I did have one.
Oh, go ahead, Ava.
So are there any like differences? I mean, I know there are probably some, but what is like the most sustainable clothing material to be wearing, and how can we like prevent excess microfiber shedding?
Yes. Thank you for answering that question. And it's again, a tricky and a bit multifaceted. I did mention on one of my slides that even if you are wearing natural fibers like cotton, for example, if they're chemically treated or they're dyed and they end up in the environment, that can still have some negative consequences. So unfortunately, you know, it's not just the damage or threat from synthetic textiles that we have to be aware of. In terms of the most sustainable fabric or choice, one thing that I heard actually at a presentation this week was to basically keep the clothing you have for as long as you can, which again gets back to the mentality of trying to reduce our waste and some of our, you know, purchasing. I think buying secondhand is a great way to think about this issue as well, because the fast fashion industry is very oriented around synthetic clothing and that kind of churn and burn waste mentality. So thinking about how you can prolong the life of the clothing you have, how you can buy secondhand rather than buying new. And yeah, just continuing as we sort of research this issue and think about the different ways that we can capture microfibers during the washing cycle and learn about these different alternative fabrics. So thank you for the question.
Yeah. All right, we do have a couple of questions coming in on the chat. Is there a way to determine locations of compost facilities that can properly deal with bioplastics?
That is a great question. I don't know if there is some type of like standard certification for that. I just know, at least, you know, from an individual level, just to pay the most attention possible to kind of where you're disposing of something. So again, if it is a bioplastic or it says it's compostable, don't put that in your traditional recycling bin. And vice versa, you know, if your community has composting, making sure that what you are putting in the composting bin is not a traditional plastic. I certainly think there's room for improvement, you know, nationwide and in communities to have more education about what facilities can and can't take. But yeah, I'm not positive if there's some kind of standardization for that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Cleveland does have one. I think it's Rumpke, but Amanda, we can chat offline about that. Another question is, are there certain proven effective laundry practices that might help with the release of fibers, like washing in cooler temperatures or a collection device in the washer?
Yeah, there are certainly consumer products you can buy now, like free-form kind of balls that you can throw in the washing machine. like a dryer ball, but it's meant to collect some of the fibers. I know there's varying efficiencies, and I think still some room for improvement for some of those. There's a lot of research going on right now about devices that don't go in the drum of the washing machine, but go farther up in the piping of the machine, or that you don't have to buy aftermarket, that are, you know, built in to the washing machines that are sold.
She'll come back like she did. Hopefully she'll come back like she did a little earlier when we had a freeze.
No.
There she is.
Am I back, Jennifer?
Yep, you're back. All right. Yeah, the video might help. All right, and another question is what do you think the top research needs are in this arena, especially with respect to plastics and water quality and or aquatic wildlife?
Sure. And did I cut out midway through the laundry practices question? I couldn't tell when I dropped.
I think you were mostly at the end. We heard collection devices like pre-market. Was there anything after that?
Oh, just adding that I know there's some studies on hand washing versus machine washing, but unfortunately hand washing still releases some microfibers, but maybe a bit less since it's a gentler process. Let's see. And then, yeah, the question, top research needs in this arena with respect to plastics and water quality. Yeah, I know that, you know, we certainly haven't studied all of the impacts on all different, you know, species and different sort of trophic levels. You know, there's been studies on microplastics in fish in the Great Lakes, and of course, lots of other ocean species, but I think there's always more data and experiments that can be contributed to understanding the scale. There's also the question of human health impacts, which is certainly a hot topic these days, but there is a lot more research needed to understand, you know, what it means to have microplastics in our drinking water and what impacts, you know, relate at the human level and not just at the wildlife level. So all of that is very top of mind right now. So thank you for that question.
I have a question back to the laundry. Are you aware of any studies that the differences between the laundry sheets versus the liquids or the pods?
Did you get that?
That is a great, yes, I did. Thank you. I'm going to go back one slide. I had an interesting picture here of soap powder, and I just took this at my local grocery store because it specifically says, you know, no microplastics on it. I haven't vetted that myself, but yeah, I'm sure there's got to be some study out there. I know like some of the pods that can be wrapped up. I believe some of those have contained plastics, you know, so and in like plastic wipes, this isn't laundry related, but like bathroom wipes, plastic particles are a big problem. So they really can be hiding in a lot of different products, which I think is why I was excited to see this particular box of laundry soap at least talking about it, you know, and pointing out that they've made a point to make sure there's no microplastics in their powder. I mean, the other thing is just the giant plastic jug that most liquid detergents come in, you know, period, is a lot of plastic and waste. So from a packaging standpoint, it's nice to see, you know, cardboard or other materials used as well. But that would be a great study. I'll have to look into that, but I'm sure someone's talking about it or starting to look into it.
There's another question from the chat. Does your team work much with human health implications of plastics? And you started to allude to that, exposure in drinking water.
Yeah, so that specifically is beyond the scope and purview of our program. Although we are aware that there are a lot of external researchers, you know, in academia or other organizations that are looking into this, you know, some of those with toxicology backgrounds or in traditional medicine. So it's certainly something that we are aware of and that many different people are interested in doing more studies on and looking into. I mean, we do know that microplastics are everywhere, and they have been found, you know, in people and in organs and in wildlife. But what that means is still a question to be determined.
Do water filters remove any of the microplastics? Like home devices?
Yeah, so within like traditional drinking water treatment plants and wastewater treatment plants, that's certainly, you know, a step, not to a 100% accuracy, but I mean, that is thought of even farther up in the process before the water is accessible from the tap or at home. I know there are kind of some entrepreneurial and new products and researchers that are looking at fibers to specifically target microplastics. I'm not sure if like your, you know, traditional Brita or other filter is already kind of capable of that, maybe to some extent, but not specifically designed for it. But I know that is a really emerging kind of piece of this as well.
Thank you. All right. I don't think that last question is for you, Haley. All right. Any other questions in the room or online? All right. I thank you very much, Haley. This is very interesting.